Tonight we have a good presentation for you. We have Beverly Boyko here from the Jackson Barracks Archive and Museum. This is Louisiana National Guard Archive, and it's a great resource that I didn't know much about. And my dad, Casey, had done a tour there and learned about the museum. And now we're happy to have Bev here tonight to give us a much more detailed look at what the museum has and how it might be useful to you in your genealogy research. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bev and she can get started with her presentation, and we're happy to have her here.
Well, thank you for inviting me tonight. It's wonderful to be here. Got to remember to stay in the camera, though. I tend to wander. I interned at this library a few years ago, so it brought back a lot of memories to like wander back up here. Because when I first came to New Orleans, I was still working on my Master's of Library and Information Science. So I was all nerding out on cataloging systems, and I wandered in here and said, "Can I come and just poke your computers?" And they thought I was a little crazy, but they took me into the basement here. It's been a few years, so it's nice to come back. So this is our museum and library at Jackson Barracks. And I'm recently, as of, well, I guess it's a year now, I'm the director now for the Louisiana National Guard Museums, 2 museums. So let's see if we make this work. Oop. Fail already. Let's see. Down arrow.
Yeah.
Worked a minute ago. So we have 2 museums, one at Pineville near Alexandria, formerly known as Camp Beauregard. Going.
Oh, hang on. Let me yeah. Try again.
Yay, there it is. Yeah. Hopefully that stuff goes away at the top. Does it? Anyway, that's our museum at Pineville. I just wanted to touch on it briefly first. And it's also on the Zoom camera here. I don't know if that's a problem.
That's okay there.
That's okay. This was built in the mid-90s. It's a replica of a World War II barracks. It's not an actual World War II barracks, but it's a replica of one. In hindsight, maybe not the best idea for, the Army was taking these things down throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and we put one up. So it's not the best of environment for a museum, but it's really cool building, and it really sets the tone for that museum because that one is based on the Louisiana maneuvers. Are you all familiar with the Louisiana maneuvers? I see some nods, yeah? So World War II, large Army maneuvers throughout central Louisiana. And this museum really focuses on that story and the story of Camp Beauregard. So that's Camp Beauregard Museum. We've got World War I, World War II, one full-time staff, a couple of part-time staff. We do a lot of school group tours. It's a wonderful little museum. It's right on Pineville. You do have to show identification to get onto Camp Beauregard, but if you're ever up that way through Alexandria, you should stop in and check it out. It's really an interesting place. But I came here tonight to talk about Jackson Barracks and the history of Jackson Barracks and the museum and the archive and some of the collections that we have in the archive. So I'm starting at the beginning here. Free Jackson Barracks. Before there was a barracks, there was, of course, all sorts of Native Americans who lived in the New Orleans area. So this is just pointing out that fact. We've got the Choctaw, the Tunica Biloxi, the Coushatta, the Chitimacha. They're all the federally recognized tribes, and the Homa are state recognized tribes. And this comes into play a little later on in the story of Jackson Barracks. Here we are, 1803 and 1809. So I love this is one of my former volunteers that's here tonight. I think turned me on to this picture because we got our little military guy right here in a blue coat, which I love because that was the Louisiana militia color, was the blue coat. So Fort St. Charles is here. There's New Orleans, Decatur's Street, I guess, is somewhere in there. And 1809 is the one up here. You can see these are the barracks right here along the river at this point in time. And this is a little incident that happened, well, big incident around 1809. So General James Wilkinson, anybody a descendant of General James Wilkinson here? No? Can't hear me? Okay, how about that? Is that better? General James Wilkinson. Actually a spy for the Spanish, but he was the top dude for the US Army in 1809. And he set up business for the US Army here down at Terrebonne. And it was a horrible place. Lots of mosquitoes, many hundreds of soldiers died before this was given up on as being the base for the US Army in this area. So I just introduce it here as a point of why Jackson Barracks got to be where it is. There's Barracks Street. Everybody knows Barracks Street in the French Quarter? Yeah. So somewhere around 1814, I think it is, they switched from down at the river to this Barracks Street location. Of course, we all know the Battle of New Orleans, 1815. Andrew Jackson happened there in Chalmette there, just, I think it's about a mile farther from where Jackson Barracks is today, but that really brought home the need for national defense for the entrance of the river. Pentagon Barracks, 1815. So New Orleans was one of the richest places in the 1820s in the US, and big need for lots of space to do business in the French Quarter area. So the powers that be in the US Army and the government decided to sell the barracks on Barracks Street and move the soldiers to the Pentagon Barracks. And didn't take long. I think about a year later, they changed their mind and decided they needed the military back in New Orleans. So they rented back their former barracks at a lot more money. So bad decision making even back then. But you can see this great revival style for these buildings, the Pentagon Barracks, and they served as the inspiration for what became Jackson Barracks. Also, about this time, we have the third coastal defense system. So after the Battle of New Orleans, this was what the US government was doing, was building these huge stone forts with casements, tiered gun portals, constructed to endure bombardments. 38 coastal forts, at least averaging 70 guns each. Fort Pike, Fort Wood, Macomb, Fort Jackson, Fort St. Philip, those are all examples. And really good for protecting the coastline, lots of soldiers required to man them. But again, horrible places for soldiers to live. Too many mosquitoes and disease and wet nastiness. But the thing that really got the barracks built where Jackson Barracks is now was the threat of slave insurrection. So this is Nat Turner's rebellion in 1831 that happened up in Virginia. So the guys in Congress that were holding the purse strings were very tuned in when this happened. And the people in New Orleans, of course, had the 1811 German Coast Uprising. So they had already had personal experience of a slave uprising. So that was the big concern that really got Congress to loosen the purse strings and designate the money in 1832. They started construction in 1833 and they completed it in 1834. And here's the beginning. Let's see, my pointer going. So right here, well, big black arrow. This is a racetrack. If anybody knows anything about that racetrack, I'm really curious. But this is where the barracks was built. General Gaines and Lieutenant Colonel David Twiggs, they were favoring a location somewhere below the city near the Battle of New Orleans. The governor and the mayor, they were more worried about the slave uprising, so they wanted it somewhere around Bayou St. John. And ultimately, the military opinion prevailed, and Jackson was president at the time. So we haven't found any kind of written evidence for it, but we strongly suspect that he may be blessed off on putting it where it was put. It was bought from a man named Pierre Coderick, I believe was the plantation owner at the time. So this is kind of what it looks like in the beginning. The little line drawing in the background there is Lieutenant Frederick Wilkinson's original drawing, original sketch. He was 22 years old at the time. Yeah, it blows my mind. I have a 32-year-old there. Anyway, he came up with the design. He based it on the Greek Revival style that he'd seen at the Pentagon Barracks. And sorry, does he have a question?
No, we were looking at.
Oh, yeah. You'll see a lot more of them today. We have some Jackson Barracks residents, former residents with us, so feel free to jump in. Anyway, he built it in a frontier fort kind of structure, so long rectangular shape, lots of tall walls all the way around, and then towers, defensive towers on the four corners. So frontier fort in nature, but built out of brick. So meant to last quite a while, and taking soldier comfort and care in mind. So it had drainage systems. It had a beautiful orchard in this area here later on. It was really unusual for the time because it was so solidly built and so permanent, other than the Pentagon Barracks. But it was very unique for 1834. This is one of the first artistic renditions. Well, actually, it's a fairly recent rendition, I think, but I think it very accurately depicts what it would have looked like from the river. The building in the middle is the headquarters building, so that was the main entranceway, just like the forts you see in cowboy movies. Everybody came through the front gate. So the front gate was the headquarters building, and the commanding general would live on the second floor of that building, and everybody else would go through the archway here into the main part of the post. And on the right, you see a sketch that dates to the late 30s, early 40s. That kind of shows you the plan. These are the officers' quarters here. There's cisterns or outhouses. I don't know which one these are in between. They did have cisterns and outhouses between. And then the enlisted men were back here, these four buildings, and then support buildings in the very back, and the river at the bottom here. That's the headquarters building in 1870-ish. The river's in behind there. And these are some of the buildings today, or at least a few years ago. So you see the Greek Revival style with the columns and the symmetry, but they've added galleries and exterior staircases, this sort of local Creole style to the Greek Revival thing. These are some of the officers' quarters buildings right on the main parade ground. Yes, this is all Jackson Barracks. I'm just going over kind of the history of and the architecture of Jackson Barracks. So there you can see some of the drainage. The drainage here was way ahead of its time. Really, most U.S. Army, they didn't give a crap about the soldiers. They just tough it out, set up a tent. This place was meant to keep soldiers well and healthy. That's the river in the background over there. This is Central Parade Field, one of the towers.
The only one still existing.
There are two towers still standing, the ones in the back, the two at the front on the river, and the headquarters building that I showed a couple of slides ago. Now we're clicking. So that the headquarters building and the two towers on the river were sacrificed in 1912 to rebuild the levee. But every other building is still standing. It's the largest collection of antebellum homes that are still intact in the entire country. been on the National Register since 1976, and it was completely renovated and rebuilt after Katrina. There's some more. This one on the right is the commissary. So the columns are a little bit different. It looks a little more utilitarian. All these buildings now and for a very, very long time, probably since the 30s, maybe even before that, are officers' quarters today. So usually 2 families in each building. And we have some of those families here. There's a tower. The tower, this is the Northeast Tower. These are used for VIP housing now. So for generals who are visiting get to stay in these. They're beautifully renovated on the inside. But originally, these were rifle loopholes. So this speaks to that slave insurrection purpose. If you were attacked or civil unrest, this was not original. This has been added. But they had 3 stories. You could fire from the very tippy top behind these crenellations or through these rifle loopholes. And in the first floor, not shown in these pictures, is embrasures. They're like a big window, smallish window openings that you could stick an artillery piece out of. So you really had a really tough defensive. And on the left over here is, you can see this really tall piece here. This is one of the few remnants of the original wall. It's 12 feet high, the original wall. And over the years crumbled down. Various renovation, restoration projects have brought it down to more like a 6-foot level, maybe even less, but that is, and then in behind it, and this is the backside of it here, this is the bakery, the original bakery. And it only exists today because when the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, did renovation work in the 1930s and early 40s, they loved to reuse everything. So they took the little bakery and turned it into a garage. They were putting in garages and kitchens and baths and really updating the barracks to be much more livable. So one of the first activities that happened on the barracks was this 1837 to 59. You've heard of the Trail of Tears, I'm sure. So the southern route of the Trail of Tears is this purple line here. It's often called the Road of Misery by the Muskogee Creek. And it was the removal of the Seminole tribe and other Native Americans from the southeast through here, through New Orleans. There was approximately 18,000 Native Americans that moved through New Orleans during this period. And they were housed and incarcerated on Jackson Barracks. And just prior to Hurricane Katrina in 2005, so it was spring of 2005, there was a fire at the headquarters building. And they were moving the general into a different building, doing some renovation work to accommodate his needs. And underneath that building came across 2 burials. One was a male, about 45 years old, in a coffin. And below him was a female, about 35 years old. And she had over 1,200 beads, like this woman here. So very distinctive of a Seminole woman. So subsequent archaeological investigation all around that area identified what we believe is the original post cemetery. And it was relocated in 1866 when Chalmette Battlefield, the National Cemetery, was created there. They disinterred everybody they could find on Jackson Barracks and moved them there, but left behind a couple of people got missed, including this woman. So when that was discovered, the Native American Graves Repatriation Protection Act, NAGPRA, kicked in, and FEMA was involved by this point because Katrina had happened. So we consulted with all the tribes in the area that had any claim to this woman or this space, which there was quite a few, and it took years and years. But in the end, well, this on the right is the Seminole War period picture at the time, and then there's the Seminole people on the left. So this culminated in 2022, I believe. We designated this area as a memorial green space. There's 5 markers there, designate, or in memorialization of anybody who might have passed away and been buried in this space: civilians, soldiers, Native Americans, enslaved people, So we had a wonderful ceremony, and tribal members from the Seminole tribe of Oklahoma came to that event, and they were U.S. Army veterans. So they were also tribal members, and they were half of the color guard, the rifle honor guard. And then the Louisiana National Guardsmen were the other half of the honor guard, and they put together this really wonderful ceremony and designated that space. So that is part of our walking tour today. And you can, if you call me, you can visit it at any time, but it is in a part of the post. It's in area A, like just behind, in the back. Yeah, back of the main post area.
That's where I remember the burial.
Yeah. This is the prison. It is also a sort of in the back of that fortified area. And this would have been where Native Americans were held, if they were considered a threat of any kind. But there are newspaper accounts of the time of the chiefs going into the French Quarter and visiting the French market and going to the theater. So we don't really know how, what their lives were like on that road. We know many people died. They were put on steamboats at the wharf at Jackson Barracks and sent up the Mississippi to Arkansas, to Little Rock, and then they walked from there. The people doing the moving of these individuals was the U.S. Army and contractors who were notorious for, embezzling the food and the money. And so many people died. But the prison here had 3 cells. It could hold as many as 56 men, I've read, in each cell. I can't even imagine that. But the guards lived on the 2nd floor and the cells were on the 1st floor. And this is it today. It's officers' housing and beautifully restored, and doesn't even have a ghost. No, it probably doesn't.
Is that on the circle?
On the back side. Yeah, we can go back to the overall. This is a beautiful, well, I think beautiful. It's a really early drawing. We don't know when this was done, but probably as early as 1840s. It could be as late as, well, it's pre-1912 because the headquarters building is in the background and we know it was gone in 1912. So it's maybe Civil War period. This is the enlisted quarters here, officers' quarters. You can't see along the main part or in here. There's a flagpole still there, and the river's in the background there. So here's the layout. Again, river down here. The cemetery is off the chart over here on the right. Again, officers' quarters, enlisted quarters, and then the support building. There, that was the commissary, the prison, and the sergeant and hospital steward, I think. In 1848, they bought this piece here, adjacent, and they blew a hole in the wall here and made a little connecting gateway. And this area became the hospital. And these are pictures of the hospital. We think this was a surgery. It was called the pharmacy, so it was a pharmacy, but it was also a surgery, I think, up here because we've got these wonderful windows. This served through the Mexican-American War in the 1848 and through the Civil War. It was taken down in I think 1898, around there. The roof apparently leaked all the time. There's one of the cisterns right there and there. These are the wards. So the wards were here. That thing there is in the middle here. Death house out the back here. Lots of yellow fever. This is the Sally Court. If you lived on Jackson Barracks, you remember that. Still there. I'm told that it used to have big wooden doors, and that somebody put the wooden doors in storage, and then that building burnt down. So the wooden doors aren't there anymore, but it still stands, very strong. And in the background, you can see little white cottages. Those were built by the Works Progress Administration in that hospital complex area in the late 30s, early 40s. This is the Civil War period. I think that's a German unit. That's one of the very few. I think we have 2 confirmed pictures of Jackson Barracks during the Civil War, maybe 3.
German unit with these,
Militia unit.
the South.
South, yes. So it was like New Orleans, it was taken over very quickly by the South and then taken over very quickly by the North. No fighting, everybody just walked out the door and handed over the gun. This is 1869, I believe. This is the 25th Infantry Regiment of Buffalo Soldiers, founded in New Orleans, created at Jackson Barracks. So this is the 2nd floor of the enlisted quarters. Gas lanterns, and see the heating back there. The guns are stacked, mosquito nets. Very interesting to see the living quarters in about 1870. The Buffalo Soldiers that went on to infamy in the West, of course, but I think they're kind of cool because they had a bicycle corps. Didn't last very long because bicycles, but I mean, what troopers to give that a go. That's how it looked on the outside in the 1870s. And that's how it looks today. Before, and pretty close. Took off the whitewash. This is a fun story about Mardi Gras connections at Jackson Barracks. So in 1874, the 13th Infantry Regiment was stationed there, and one of its officers was this guy here, Captain Arthur MacArthur. He was attending a Mardi Gras ball in 1875, where he met Mary Pickney Hardy. And of course, he went on to a distinguished career in Civil War, the Reconstruction duty, Indian Wars, Spanish-American War, Philippine insurrection, and their 3rd child was Douglas MacArthur. Yeah, World War II. And the pictures on the right are the King Rex. Oh, geez, I've lost my Mardi Gras mojo. Anyway, they used to come to Jackson Barracks by steamboat and do the whole, accepting the key and all that fancy stuff. Probably up to World War I, I guess. I'm not sure if we know exactly the day when this stopped, but they would have a military escort up and down between Canal Street and Jackson Barracks. This is the hospital that replaced that weird little octagonal building. It's called Huft Hall now, named after a very distinguished soldier from World War II who served as adjutant general after the war. And it was renovated by the WPA. You can see it took us a while to figure this out, but this kind of gives it away right here. But they really changed that building into this building. So they really gave it an overhaul. It was bachelor officer quarters in the late 30s and 40s, and now it's a temporary building place. And it does have a ghost. Yeah. Here we are in the Spanish-American War period. So the artillery is becoming more and more important at Jackson Barracks. The Washington Artillery, the Louisiana Field Artillery, and the Donaldsonville Cannoneers all at Jackson Barracks this time. That's the Washington Artillery on the right. It might be the left too. Nice pictures of the levee road there, and a postcard, an early postcard view. 1899, I think the left one is. Easter, April 2nd, 1899. This is 1907. Post artillery comes into play. This is World War I era. So this building here, these white buildings still exist today. They built this great monstrosity of a state building in the middle, but these were rescued after Katrina because they date to the World War I period, and they've been lovingly restored as well. 1917, the Cleveland Indians baseball team held spring training at Jackson Barracks. Let's see, Tris Speaker and Smokey Joe Wood. That's who's in the upper left corner there. They drilled with members of the Coast Artillery Corps and the New Orleans minor league team, the Pelicans. And as player manager, Speaker led the Indians to their first World Series title in 1920. That was kind of a cool one. This is, the bottom picture is a panoramic of the parade field in 1920. This is General Pershing right here reviewing the troops. Some more action at Jackson Barracks during World War I. We've got a cavalry unit at this time, the 108 Cavalry, in addition to the Washington Artillery. And the cavalry love to do polo tournaments. So there's the field up there. You can see these little ball kind of things. And this is how it looks today. But that was a big deal at the time. This is the WPA in the 30s and 40s, and General Fleming. I think he holds the record for longest serving adjutant general in the whole country. I think over 27 years, if you add it all up. He was also the first Army chief of the National Guard Bureau, and he served as chief of the National Guard Bureau in the 50s, and then he came back to Louisiana with adjutant general again. I mean, he served between 1928 and 1964 as adjutant general, like over off and on 27 years. So an incredible guy. I strongly suspect that he started the library at Jackson Barracks, and I know he started the museum. So my favorite dude.
He ate good bubble gum.
Oh, there you go. Good bubble gum.
He was retired.
Yeah.
We would walk from school to St. Maurice, and he was outdoors walking, and it was
So that, wow, I had not heard that story. Well, here in the 30s, he took advantage of the WPA program and created a couple of projects, and he made the buildings livable at Jackson Barracks. He got those kitchens and baths and car garages and roads, and he had people working on this place for years. And he also, and I guess I talked it later, he did a lot for history with the military history data collection. So. But these are the cottages then and now. Katrina wiped them out, but they were restored in kind. So there's two periods of significance for Jackson Barracks in the National Register nomination. One is the original building, and the second one is the WPA period. So they totally documented these buildings before they took them down after Katrina, and then reconstructed them exactly the same. Not all of them, but many of them.
the one that's on the top left. Do you know where that's located?
That could be the one on the end or second from the
think it
end. I'm
is.
not sure. That was yours, huh?
One on the end, closest to the river, and the one next to it was where we grew up, because I recognize the arches
Yeah.
on the porch.
Well, you have to come back and see it again. Fleming Hall was also put up at that time. I don't think it was originally called Fleming Hall, but it might be, but there's the WPA upper right. That's their work, and then how it looks today. And that's where the fire happened in 2005, right before Katrina. This is World War II. Joe Louis is in the background right here. And those are those white buildings again. The Italian POWs. Do we have Italian descendants in? Yeah. The Italian Prisoner, a book that came out not too long ago, set at Jackson Barracks. So I'll give a shout out to them. There are those guys. And of course, the band and lots of, it was again, rest, recuperation, port of embarkation. Before, these are Louisiana National Guard units that served in World War II. Washington Artillery and in the Pacific Theater. Here we are in the 50s, I believe this is. So here's all the World War II barracks buildings. There's the original rectangle right there. Cemetery was found under these buildings here. So they just kept building this way. Now it goes all the way to the swamp, but in the 50s and 60s and 70s, these were all taken down. So I think it's in here. Betsy, someone said about they had a Betsy. Here's my Betsy. So, 50s and 60s, and that's when the Guard really turned into disaster response and pick, I mean, they've been doing it literally since forever, but even 1927 flood, they played a large part, but by the time we get to Hurricane Betsy, they're really,
And this is over. If you want, I'll tell you a Betsy story.
Yeah.
We were there for Betsy.
yeah. Yeah, I think 4 to 6 feet, something like that is what I've been told happened in the lower nine. The Hungarians, any Hungarians? Yeah, so 100 Hungarians were housed on Jackson Barracks in 1956 when that revolution happened. Some of those World War II wood barracks were put to work to house some of these individuals. And one of the first things we did at the museum when it opened in 2014, 13, was host some of these people who wanted to put a plaque up to honor, the fact that that's where they were brought into the country, and they still live in New Orleans.
What year is that? Monday, January?
56. It's 1950. Oh, this is 57. Maybe the revolution was 56 and they got in 57. Yeah, January. So.
We just visited the Hungarian Museum.
Oh, okay. Yep. This air guard starts happening late 40s, 50s, although the 122nd Bomb Squadron, and we got a veteran here from the 122nd. There he is over there, Dave. So have to get my air guard guys, their airplane pictures with the Superdome. See Dave after if you have questions. Yeah, you hear those eagles flying over, or the jet flying over now. That's the 159th. They're out of Belle Chase now. And they were never out of Jackson Barracks. They were at the Lakefront Airport. But they've always had a presence at Jackson Barracks in one way or another. Now we're in 1993. So this is a movie set. Great. Interview with the Vampire movie set. Yeah, I'm told that they lit it up. It was a dramatic, I can't do vampires, so I've never seen the movie, but I'm told they burned this at the end, and the wharf. We do not have a wharf today. But there's the enlisted quarters there. There's the officers' quarters here. And now this is post 9/11, and you can take Louisianans to war, but you still have to have Mardi Gras. Right here. This is Mardi Gras during a Desert Storm, actually, in 1990. And the Washington Artillery tryouts, that's in Afghanistan, 2004 or 5. And of course, Katrina. So this is if any of you have been to Jackson Barracks Museum, those are our airplanes underwater. So an individual swam from one end of the post to the other, and he said he rested. He had a life jacket. He just dog paddled. Took him 5 hours to get, 2 big blocks. And he rested on the wings on the way. This is at the barracks too. This is the rooftop right there, right where the museum is. Just see a little bit of a rooftop. So this is a little bit after the water receded. It was 4 to 6 feet deep on that main parade field, up to 15 feet here in the middle where the museum was, and up to 20 feet at the end by the swamp. Yeah, there's the circle there around the enlisted quarters. Yeah, so the cemetery is in this area here. And these are the officers' quarters on each side. There's the Beauregard Drive homes here. And the guys had just got back from Afghanistan, or I think days before Katrina happened. It's quite the thing. This is rebuilding after the barracks. So for a minute, they were like, okay, it's not a good idea. It's going to flood again. We should just eliminate Jackson Barracks. But those historic buildings really had to be saved. I mean, people love them. So, once historians get involved, you get more historic buildings. So this building is brand new on the right. So now we've got Greek revival, and then the WPA comes in and does revival of Neo-Greek revival, and now we've got Neo-Greek revival. So they made it blend in. It's beautiful.
Where is that building?
This, let's see how to describe. Fleming Hall's over here. to the right. So it's kind of the, just out the back side of the original rectangle, kind of the World War I. Oh, I might have an overhead. Yeah, here we go. So it's right there. That one. So here's the tower. Where's the towers? There's a tower there, a tower there.
You know, that used to be all field.
Yeah, this is where the cemetery was found in here. And this has all been rebuilt, everything here, except those two white buildings and that giant state building brick in the middle. They tried very hard to get rid of it, but they couldn't. But all this came down and all this was rebuilt. There's the museum today. Again, doing a little brief Bible. So this little background, the library, like I mentioned, I think Fleming got it going. This is Fleming Hall, headquarters building. On the left are the hundreds of worthy historians working on the historical military data project. And this is the beginnings of the museum in 1964. So Fleming retired in 64 and went, I think we need a military museum on Jackson Barracks. So he made it happen and he started collecting stuff. And then about 10 years after that, it got moved into the 1837 gunpowder magazine. So this was originally built to house gunpowder. It had an extra wall on the outside of it in case it blew up. And it was about quite a ways, like a whole block. It's north of St. Claude. And that's how the inside of it looked. They built a mezzanine layer here to a level to make more exhibit space. And it served as a museum from 77 or I think 74 actually, up until here it is here. And it's still there today. It was rescued after Katrina or preserved after Katrina. But everything else on this block is gone after Katrina. The artillery park is still where it used to be today. That's a little gazebo, that's gone. And this, I believe, is the theater. I was not here before Katrina. I came in 2011. But they basically took the square footage of all the buildings that were related to the museum and to the library, which was closer to the river, and put it into one building that was rebuilt by FEMA. So this is the library building here. It was in the vicinity of where that cemetery was as well. You can see they lost about 3 shelves worth of books. So it was in that sort of 6-foot zone of water. That's the front door. And this is the museum. They were more in the 12 to 16-foot zone. So we lost at least 30% of the collection. But it was, all the paper was rescued and frozen, and the objects were rescued, and textiles were sent for conservation and dry cleaning. So this is just about 2012, 2013, somewhere. So this is the museum today. Plus we've got, well, you can see the artillery park hasn't been rebuilt here. So all those big macro artifacts had to be moved out and stripped and cleaned and restored. And that's where our volunteers came in. We've got a few of them here today. So they're still going at it. I think they're on the last vehicle, but then they go back to the beginning and start again. So this is the museum right here. We have a library in the middle, and then we have what we call the multi-use complex over here. It replaced our theater space, and that is rental space available. The Gunpowder magazine was just restored to open space. They did not rebuild the chapel or the officers club after Katrina. I have no idea why, but so this is used for meeting space. This is the entrance off of St. Claude that's normally open. This is a dining facility, and they had a PX, a barber shop, and a credit union as well.
Oh, what we call Area B. They call it the Claymore.
I think it's C. Yeah, it's C. Yeah. There's the museum again. Beautiful building. So I'm just going to click through some of the exhibits here. Anybody recognize these pictures? The signs in the background there? They were on St. Charles Avenue, I believe, during Katrina. We borrowed those from the State Museum. These are all the flags that flew. Every National Guard in the country was involved in some way in the restoration and rescuing. So they headquartered at Belle Chase, and each state brought their flag, and they had them hanging in the hangar at Belle Chase, and then they brought them to us afterwards. This helicopter, if you come now, you will see this really cool display. We've built a rooftop underneath it. It fell through a rooftop during a rescue operation. And then they had to get a bigger helicopter to rescue the rescue helicopter. It's kind of a cool story. But we built a ramp, wheelchair accessible ramp up the back side of this helicopter, so you can, and if you're mobile, you can sit right inside it now and look at a flyover video. So we've got a little interactive experience just coming online there. So that we did the Hurricane Katrina story first. We're redoing that one now to be more all the other disasters that have come since and before. This is the Global War on Terror exhibit. This is the Desert Storm. So it's right, we've got our Humvee that is two-tone. The Humvee you can sit inside as well. This is our Cold War period. We have a half of an F-4 jet here. You can sit inside that as well and pretend you're a pilot. World War II, Stuart tank, among other things. And this is World War I with our Renault tank. It's also a state museum object, but they don't have a place to display it, lucky us. It went totally under. A museum in Texas restored it for us. They borrowed it. They were building their own. They needed a prototype, so they stored it for the many years. It was 2005 to 2012 before the museum got back online. This is the Small Arms Collection. We have a wonderful group of volunteers. Also one of them here tonight, if you want to get involved with this project. They take apart all these guns. They were all underwater for weeks. So they take them all apart and clean them and restore them. This is our Jackson Barracks exhibit. So kind of a on the wall version of what I've just told you. Spanish-American War. Civil War, we just finished that about a year ago, maybe less. Got a really cool naval sword there, very rare. Washington artillery parrot rifle, and redemption and resurrection, two howitzers here. You can only see one of them. They were in the Battle of Liberty Place during the Reconstruction period. We tell the Reconstruction story and Civil War. We've got a Civil War flag up here, Washington artillery, actual remnant from the Civil War. This is our War of 1812 exhibit and the colonial period exhibit. So we do everything from 1718 right up to current in the museum. And we have a little obstacle course. Kids love this. They climb under the wire. Here it's rope over the wall, through the tunnel, punch the bag, and they can try on their helmets and clothes and stuff. We've got an education space on the left here. So if you have a meeting you want to do sometime, you want to come visit me and have your meeting at Jackson Barracks, we've got a little space here. We've got a conference room that holds about 20 people. This is a view of our courtyard. That's our multi-use right here. Beautiful room, big room. We have an annual gala in the fall with our partner, our 501c3 that supports us is the Louisiana National Guard Foundation. So all of the donations, I should have covered that. The exhibits are all built with donations. So our nonprofit and this gala supports all the exhibit construction. The staff are all state employees and the building is federally supported. There's the gunpowder magazine and the museum in the background. This is the interior of the gunpowder magazine today. We used it yesterday for an archery program. That was a ton of fun. We had like 300 people yesterday. It's a new event we're going to do, Family Festival in May. So if you see that in the future, come out and check it out. This is our collection storage area. Wonderful things. The only wonderful thing about a hurricane is you get really top-notch storage on the second floor. That was the curator at the time, Stan Amersky, insisted when the new museum was designed and built, they had the opportunity to design it as a museum, as opposed to a gunpowder magazine or a replica of a World War II barracks. They really built it with the function in mind. and had a lot of good ideas about how to, especially in New Orleans. So we're on the second floor. It has a separate heating and air conditioning system, and tons of storage space. So if anybody has collections from the Louisiana National Guard, we focus on the Louisiana National Guard and militia story now. We used to do under General Fleming and predecessors, all military history in general, but now we really zoom in on the Louisiana militia story. But we do have lots of collections. We do historic garrison tours. This is one I did last week for the Friends of the Cabildo. Anybody who has a group that wants to see the historic buildings, or even a small family, I don't have a minimum requirement. Just call me up. We'll pick a time. If it's hot summer, I recommend we do a driving tour. But I take people around and show them the actual buildings and tell the story of the cemetery and what happened in some of these places. This is our library reading room. We've got vertical storage files here. These are 1920s to current. So organized by military unit. So if you have people who are in the Louisiana National Guard or militia, we've probably got some paperwork in here you might be interested in. We've got a 6,000 volume library. It's not a circulating library, but you're welcome to come and hang out with it. And you might be able to talk me into letting you borrow it. Few of the collections that I think might be of interest for you guys. I mentioned the WPA. So this is one of the big projects that Fleming had done. He hired historians and librarians, and they combed newspapers and university archives, late 30s, early 40s. They found every reference they could find, dig out to Louisiana military history, and they manually transcribed them, typed them up, bound them in beautiful volumes, built table of contents by hand, indexes by hand per volume, and an entire index card system by last name, individual last name. So you could come and with the name of a particular ancestor, look at that old school library card index and find out what number volume he is mentioned in. There's 352 volumes. And when I came to work in 2011, what you see here is the Katrina, post-Katrina rebinding of these. They were originally, I should have a picture. They were kind of a marble handmade thing. These are rebind. The rebinders did the best they could, but they threw away pages that were not salvageable, which were usually the front pages, table of contents, and the back pages of the index, and then they put pages in Mylar and backwards and upside down and the wrong names on things, and it was really frustrating to say the least. And but over the years, I kind of figured out, just accidentally putting clues together, that it was all microfilmed in 1990 by the Genealogical Society of Utah. Thank you for genealogical societies. So I called them up one day and I said, would it be possible to get a copy? Because I've got bits and pieces. And they said, oh, absolutely. It's your data. Well, they stuck a thumb drive in the mail and I had it the next day after years of like trying to make it work. So, so we have that digitally now. Now they're JPEGs, they're not the easiest things to use, but it's pretty cool. And we are working on this site here. We are turning them into flip books and putting them on our website. So we hope to someday have them available online, but right now they are available in the archive. This is another collection that historically has been of a lot of use to genealogists. This is 1912. I love this picture. This is the government supervisor. This is the photostat man here. This is the Louisiana Military Records Commissioner examining for legibility. And these young ladies are typing up the ones that can't be photostated. I couldn't figure out why we had these gorgeous books right here, beautifully bound. You know, they had book plates in the front, sponsored by such and such foundation, book binding, and they were photocopies. I couldn't figure it out. why does anybody bind photocopies so beautifully? But these are 1912 photo sets of the original muster rolls for the Louisiana Civil Confederates during the Civil War. So Louisiana was one of the first states that was allowed to go to the National Archives and photocopy all the Confederate rolls. If anybody's familiar with the Booth books, sometimes they're called the Booth books. There's 3-volume set. He compiled all this information into this very handy dandy 3-volume set. Where you can just look up your ancestor and I'll say, he enlisted on this day, he went to the hospital on this day. It's kind of a summary of all the information. We inherited all his raw material records. So it's a pretty cool collection. And we have these from the 40s to the 70s. These are pre-computer kind of punch cards. This is how the National Guard kept track of their enlistments up until the computer age. So we inherited those as well and pull out some cool information. We have our finding aids for some of our smaller collections. We have 2 archive rooms, again on separate units, HVAC units and fire suppression units. So we're built to be archive rooms that we store photographs and small collections in. So we do have some finding aids on our website. You can check that out. This is where we're at. Lower 9th Ward. You come in off of here's St. Claude right here. You come in the St. Claude Gate. Sometimes they randomly close the St. Claude Gate because it is an active Louisiana National Guard facility, and you have to come in from the north side here. This is the Washington Artillery, still on Jackson Barracks, and the 139th Armory. So they're still, in the future, they are building a fence right here. In fact, they've started construction on that so that the gate off of St. Claude will be left open during the day. You don't have to show ID at that point. You just come on and off and visit at will. But for now, you still have to check in at the gate, show your ID, say you're going to the museum. We're open Tuesday through Friday, 9 to 5, and the last Saturday of the month, 9 to 2. So you're all welcome. Come and check it out. I think that gets us to the end. So, questions, sharing stories, Jackson Barracks people.
I'll share one from Hurricane Katrina. The night of, Hurricane Betsy. I was in about 5th grade. We lived in that second house I was showing you, it's, wood side. And that night, everybody was in their own homes, but it got to be really bad weather late at night, as I recall, as a kid. So they came to each house, knocked on the door, and they sent us to what was called the bachelor offices. We were on that left side. Bachelor offices was 3rd or so from the front. So they bring us upstairs, and it was all families. I don't know if y'all live in.
Now we stayed in the house.
So we go to bachelor offices, and they got like an open area around by the windows, but they had individual rooms in the middle. So to us kids, we wanted to be away from the parents, so we went in the middle room, and there were girly pictures along the wall.
Whoa.
Like 5th grade, I never forgot that.
My story at Betsy was, we lived in Circle, 4 houses.
Yeah,
We
the
lived
enlisted courts.
in the house right in front of the old gate.
Okay, the Sally Court, yeah.
So we walked all in the house. And, we went out and sat on the screen porch. We were watching the trees fall. We could hear them crack, and one fell across the road. Didn't hit anything, but it blocked, so you couldn't go around a circle.
Oh, yeah.
And it blocked the road. And then we didn't get any floodwaters back that way. We had to walk close up to St. Claude, towards St. Claude.
Yeah.
And it got closer than it got.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know the parade field was built up in 1834 when they built it. And it's close to the river, so it's got that natural higher sliver by the river thing going on for it. So it does pretty well, relatively speaking. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
It's like living on a playground.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place, really is. I encourage everybody to come check it out. Come check out the museum and the archive. It's really a nice, fun place. And if you want to do a meeting there, let me know, or come and visit the buildings, let me know. Yeah. Yeah,
In the back.
yeah, gentleman in the back.
Did the newspaper articles say that the 141 was the first unit into Rome?
It may have. Was the 141 the first into Rome? Oh, it's not letting me back up again. Oh, I should know, but I don't. Yeah, the 141 has an amazing history. You could have someone from them. Oh, it's quite a ways back. Let's see. Oh. Almost there.
Yeah.
Entered Rome first. That's what it says. Yeah, they are an illustrious unit. And the gun that was at Jackson Square, Washington Artillery Park. So that is now in the front of our museum. I meant to point it out the very first slide, but then we had all those technical issues. Let's go back to that first one. There it is, right there. So it's a replica gun. It's not a real parrot rifle, but the real one's inside the museum and the replica's out front. But any other questions for me? Yeah.
The largest inventory of anti-gun buildings. That's very interesting. How many are there?
Oh, I think it's 14, I want to say 13, 14. Oh, Dave's got it. My volunteer over here.
Open to the public?
No. By special arrangement, sometimes we can go into some of the historic homes. We have done the towers, the billeting part of the towers. And we say largest collection of antebellum homes. Let me see here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Masters building out back still exists. It's 1897, I think. Sorry? Of this place? Do we have? Sorry, I'm distracted by the sound coming in. Frederick Wilkinson was the architect, 22 years old. And he was buried in Girard Cemetery, the one that got moved for the Superdome. He and his wife. We have the tombstone for his wife in the Jackson Barracks history exhibit at the museum now, because they moved that cemetery and the tombstone ended up at Jackson Barracks. But we don't know too much about him. You can Google him up. He did do, I think he did a cemetery. It's not coming to mind though, in New Orleans. So he did do a little bit, but again, yeah, I think yellow fever was what got him in before he got to be very old.
What was this time?
Wilkinson, Frederick Wilkinson. Yeah. A lieutenant, a second lieutenant, 22-year-old second lieutenant.
A legal system
Yeah,
trying to make.
young guys. So during the Mexican-American War, I know a lot of the generals that you all know from the Civil War, Grant, Lee, Beauregard, of course, they were stationed in New Orleans and probably housed at Jackson Barracks. We know for sure Grant was at Jackson Barracks. It's in his memoir. We tried valiantly to prove that Lee was. We say he was anyway. Yeah, we know he was an engineer and he was stationed at New Orleans, and the engineers were stationed at Jackson Barracks. So we take credit for Lee being there as well. But so a lot of famous guys came through there in the Mexican War period and the Civil War period. Yeah. And today it's there's I think 1,200 or so people that live and work on Jackson Barracks every day. It's a pretty busy place. It's getting bigger and bigger all the time. And the other end of the post, I didn't even talk about post Katrina. They built 91 houses little Katrina cottages up there. And they house people state employees who live on Jackson Barracks or work on Jackson Barracks, and also soldiers that work on Jackson Barracks too. So lots of families, lots of people, lots of kids going to school at St. Bernard. And it's a wonderful place, except for the shooting on both sides. No, gunfire, not actual shooting. Any other questions for me? I want to acknowledge my volunteers. We got Harold in the back and Vicky. They helped me yesterday at our family fest. And Harold works with the Small Arms Collection, and Vicky jumps in whenever. Dave and his lovely bride here. Dave Harold. How long have you been coming to Jackson Barracks, Dave? 21 years. So these 122nd guys, they come every Wednesday, except for the third Wednesday when they take their lovely brides out for lunch. But they come every Wednesday, and I think they started out with airplanes. I don't know how you managed to get a B-26 out of Chile. Yeah. So the airplanes, and now they're working on Jeeps and trucks and anything you need, they get it done. And now they have a Coast Guard guy, and they've got civilian guys, and they've got some young guys. I have one young guy. Oh, did he leave? I have the young man that was in the back. It's my latest volunteer too. So occasionally we pick up. So if you're interested in volunteering, oh, and I have Mr. Midkiff here. He was a volunteer with that WPA collection. Yeah. So we have a great volunteers.
Here, I can't speak to the particular.
Yeah.
But it is Eloise Mayu.
Yeah.
Age 91. 96.
Washington Artillery.
Oh, you volunteer.
Yeah. Did lots of photography, photo collection. You've donated some wonderful photos. We lost a lot of photos and a lot of the archives. So it's wonderful to have people like bring their memories in and give us their wonderful photos. And now we can digitize things. So if you want to keep your photos but give us copies, that's great. But we take anything and everything to do with the Louisiana National Guard or Jackson Barracks, and we give it a wonderful permanent home and make it available to researchers like you guys. Yes. Wonderful. Yes. Your husband was in Washington Artillery for many years, many years, decades probably, I guess. Yeah. Wonderful. Any other questions? Yeah.
Well, historic collection has a microfilm on people that served in the Civil War. Did you have that also?
We do not have any microfilm that survived Katrina at all. We had a small collection. It might have included something like that. I haven't tackled the job of restoring the microfilm. We did get some of it restored. That's good to know, though. I will definitely have to check that out. Yeah. Yeah, no one's going to ask me if I'm affiliated with the World War II Museum. That's usually what I get. Or not, no.
So there's an affiliation.
Yeah.
All the people.
Oh, not really. I mean, we loan objects to them, and they bring their summer students to visit. So that's about all. We're an old school kind of museum. You saw our exhibits. They're very text heavy. We don't have a lot of bells and whistles. We have a few digital things, and we do it all ourselves. We have a staff of 4 or 5 of us, I think. I've kind of forgotten now. Curator, director, digital person, graphic designer, and a historian. And the historian actively documents the history of Louisiana National Guard every day. So we collect, of course, now digital archives and have stored much of that material too. So yeah, it's a wonderful place to work.
Are you originally from New Orleans?
Of course not. No, I'm sure my accent gave it. No, no, I'm not, but I feel New Orleanian. I've been here since 2012 and 11. I worked for the U.S. Army since the mid-90s. I started at Fort Bragg and ended up Fort Pickett in Virginia, and where I started doing collections work. I started out in archaeology and cultural resource management, that kind of thing with the NAGPRA and the Native American graves. That's sort of archaeological research is what I started out doing for the US Army. Ended up doing museum work when I got to Virginia, met the curator from Louisiana, and Katrina happened and my job in Virginia didn't happen. So I said, you call me when you're gonna get that new museum going because you need me to do collections management. So that's how I started here in Louisiana with collections management. And Dave's known me since day one. Harold's kind of new, but we cataloged over 10,000 objects because the database for that collection was lost as well. So I had some deeds of gift, the paperwork where people donated things, but couldn't match the things to the paperwork unless they were really unique and the descriptions were really good. So it was kind of like doing a puzzle or archaeology of a museum because it had been, you know, swamped and turned upside down. So I spent until about last year recataloging everything and redoing the archive, and that's how I ended up in library and information science too, because I now have an archive to take care of. I better learn how to be an archivist. So that's how I ended up here. But yeah, so I called Virginia home, Louisiana home. Originally I'm from Canada though, so you might hear few Canada, a few odd vowels here and there. I just keep blowing where life sends.
How can we find out about how to donate to the foundation and or be a volunteer for any of us?
Yeah, how to donate to the foundation is you can just Google up Louisiana National Guard Foundation. They've got a website with a big donate button on it. You can do it online if you'd like. The museum has an old school donation box. You can write a check to Louisiana National Guard Foundation, drop it off at the museum, or just throw some money in our donation box. Volunteered at the museum, just send me an email, probably the easiest thing to do. And tell me what days you're available. There Tuesday through Friday. I don't have as much work as I used to have because we have made it through the collection once, but we're still collecting things. And the museum in Pineville didn't have a hurricane, but it had only one person from 1990 to, so they had a lot of backlog collection and very bad storage because of that building that was not meant to be a museum. So we've been taking all their collection and bringing it down here and storing it because we have wonderful storage space. So we had to catalog all their material as well. So we have a lot of collections management work that's still happening to some degree, but it's kind of under control. But yeah, we've got photos that need scanning, and I'm sure there's always jobs. So we'd love to have volunteers. Any other questions? I don't want to keep it all too long. Have I?
So, any questions on Zoom? Anyone want to unmute and ask a question?
These Zoomers, they're all quiet. Are they still there?
They're there.
Oh.
Okay, well, I guess we can wrap up for tonight if it's if there are no other questions. And but thank you all for thank you all for coming out tonight, and we appreciate it, and it's good to see everybody tonight. Again, as I mentioned, the Genealogical Research Society will be back here in September, and if you want to get in touch with us, our website is grsno.org, and you can grab one of our membership links after the event. And we hope you enjoyed tonight's presentation, and thank you so much for coming out.